I don't remember the last time that I saw Ian Rotten. Would be literally 10 years ago or more, when he had come to a wrestling show that I was at and wanted to purchase some of my shit. I was coming out the back and he had bought a ticket. But anyway, here's the fucking thing. We still suffer today in the state of Kentucky, and we'll make this the last one because this will probably take me a while.
Okay.
We still suffer in the state of Kentucky today in terms of the draconian rules and regulations and just the ridiculous minutia and detail of the regulations of the Kentucky Athletic Commission over professional wrestling. Anything from absolutely, not only is no intentional bleeding allowed, but any accidental blood, even a bloody nose, even a bloody lip, the match has to end immediately. You can imagine how wonderful that is in a main event match like for, the WWF or even for a little OVW. You lose your promoter's license if you advertise a wrestler who is not licensed as of that point. There's rules on how thick the padding can be on the ring and the distance of the rails from the ring. And if a wrestler goes over the rail into the people, even to high five people, well, then he's going to lose his license. And it's just on. And
what is the source of all of these rules? Is it just down to money? I mean, it sounds particularly difficult.
This is Ian Rotten and his garbage hardcore wrestlers moved into Kentucky, into Louisville, and had his hardcore shows, and he got written up in the Louisville Eccentric Observer newspaper, and his big, fat, bloated, hepatitis-ridden body. That's why they fired him from Taco Bell, because he tested positive for hepatitis, because he's bled everywhere on every fucking continent. Pictures of him bleeding with his barbed wire wrapped baseball bat on the front of the newspaper, news stories about when either one of his wrestlers would puncture an artery, or just people found out that there was this thing going on called hardcore professional wrestling in front of 200 people in a fucking skating rink where wrestlers were slinging blood all over the fucking audience. And everybody was goddamn falling in light tubes and mouse traps and fucking whatever the fuck it is that those people do. And you had to be licensed in the state of Kentucky to be a professional wrestler or to be a wrestling promoter. And that was pretty much the extent of the rules, except paying a 5% tax for 50 years until this stuff got on the news and they found out about it in Frankfurt. And they called this goof to Frankfurt to a hearing to testify why the fuck should we not put an end to this and pull your license, and what the fuck are you doing? And he had gig marks all over his head, and he cut a promo on them, and they revoked his wrestler's license and his promoter's license. And if they'd have been able to, they'd have probably revoked his driver's license, and they kicked him across the river in Indiana. But during that period of time that he was active, and still remains active in Indiana whenever he can get a sucker to finance him so more people can be permanently mutilated and bleed to death and shit.
So in essence, Ian Rotten is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, you can't. For the long time, you couldn't have wrestling at any of the National Guard armories in Indiana because of that kind of shit that had been in there. And a lot of schools around all over the Louisville area, schools, middle schools, high schools, they won't touch wrestling because of all the outlaws, because that shit's been around and they've heard about that stuff. And now there's tons of regulations from the commission because a bunch of guys who didn't have the talent to be in the real business had to go so far to do those type of things in front of a bunch of fucking 200 people that somehow think that that's a cool thing to do. The entire professional wrestling business suffered and continues to suffer for it, both in terms of bad publicity, government regulation, and general fucking skeeviness for anybody that's seen that type of thing, that has a level head on their shoulders. Well, I can tell you, and also at this point, the bloom is off that rose as far as the WWE being able to draw 18,000 people or anywhere close to it in Louisville. They did at one time, but that not anymore. But secondly, they have been pissy at the State Athletic Commission in Kentucky for ages, because the last time they did a pay-per-view in the state of Kentucky was in Lexington at Rupp Arena, and they were made aware, as all wrestling promotions who operate in the state of Kentucky are. And believe me, since I was involved with OVW for so long, I know exactly what all these rules are. And one of the rules that they have with the State Athletic Commission in Kentucky, which is a state agency and thus, therefore, it's a state fucking law, is you can't have blood blading in a wrestling match. That's because of Ian Rotten and the hardcore fuckwads and douchebags and imbeciles that broke fluorescent light tubes over each other's heads and wallowed around in broken glass and barbed wire and made asses of themselves in public. And it got on the news and led to the Kentucky Commission having some of the strictest rules, maybe the strictest rules on wrestling and the most rules on wrestling almost anywhere in the country. And the rules are a whole lot stricter now than they were back in 2000. But the son-in-law, because he's above everything and laws and rules don't apply to him, he actually fucking just right in front of the commissioner cut himself with a razor blade is illegal and against the law on pay-per-view, and basically dared the commission to do something about it, which they did. The commissioner actually wanted to fine the WWE $50,000 and pull their promoter's license, but because they were at the time paying so much taxes on their shows, the Frankfurt backed up on that somewhat and didn't stand behind the guy. But their legal department and the WWE got involved, and they've been pissy with the Athletic Commission, and the Athletic Commission's been pissy with them ever since. And so they deprive the people in the state of Kentucky from getting a chance to see live TVs or pay-per-views, even though, as we found out here recently, they don't even use real blood anymore. But they just don't want to give the people of Kentucky a pay-per-view or a TV show, because they have to follow the rules that all the other promotions in the state of Kentucky have to follow, and they're pissed off about it.